so many things I want to ask you, but one of the things I wanted to ask you is, it seems that the premise of the film, it's a fiction film, obviously, is people have anxieties around sex. And I'm curious about some of the anxieties you explore, some of the almost neurotic attitudes about sex at a time when you think we've transcended that. Well, we clearly haven't. Talk a little bit about that side of it, because you have a sex therapist who hasn't had an orgasm. Mm-hmm. You have a gay man who doesn't want to have an orgasm with his boyfriend. You have various people who have dilemmas that are very funny in the film, but that also point out dilemmas that we might think we had put behind us.
Well, I think of the dilemmas as really symptoms of a common distress or anxiety about that we all are in right now. The strange time where technology seems to all link us and yet it separates us, where this permeation of fear which symptomatically comes with this weird theocratic kind of anti-sex thing, which is connected somehow to an anti-immigrant thing and an anti-terrorist thing and everything else that, is weirdly equated by the powers that be. The sexual minority and the terrorists are equally dangerous to Pat Robertson, right? Right. And so this strange, there's a line in the film, it's just like the 60s, only with less hope. There is this strange thirst and hunger for change now, but we're no longer adolescents. It's not the 60s. We know that utopia isn't possible. And we feel more powerless the more tools we're given, the more media, the more... It's just that our anxieties now have to be satiated in marketing niche, by shopping, buying, acquiring. And so the sexual realm in which all the characters have their problems, obviously the gay man wanting to open up the relationship is not the problem. Yeah. He has much deeper problems.
He's compulsively taping himself, though. He's
compulsively taping himself for a reason that I don't want to give away right now, but it was somewhat inspired by the film Tarnation that I was, executive producer on. This idea also today is like, if I'm on camera, it somehow proves my existence. The YouTube age. This is the reality show thing. No matter how horrifying I look as a human being, if I'm on that camera, if I'm on this camera, I exist now, which is different. Yeah. Even from 10 years ago, and that strange time, it proves this. It doesn't prove, but it illustrates the situation that all the characters are in where they can't connect. They're all trying to answer the question, am I going to be alone or am I not going to be alone? And the orgasm, the open relation, all those things are just symptoms of that. So when a woman can't have an orgasm, obviously it's more than just not being able to have an orgasm. There's a lot of things involved. It's society, her relationship with her father, just a misogyny in the air. Why can't she connect these things? Why can't we connect with each other when there's so much possibility for it? Why is there a numbness? Why is there this desire for change, but we really have no... Criticism is a high art right now, but there's no alternatives.
Right, exactly.
Stephen Colbert is brilliant, but what else can replace what we're afraid of? So this film is trying not so much to criticize, but to present an alternate and maybe even an old-fashioned way of thinking of, if we can, all be in the same group, in the same room. The New York City blackout, that moment was the most beautiful moment I'd experienced in kind of a societal way, when everyone thought they were going to be dead and then they're not. There was no violence in the city. The people met millions of people they had never met before that night, even in their own building. Parties on the stoop, bonfires, marching band. Many of the people in the film I was with that night. And that feeling of hope is what we try to, to give to our audience with this film.
It's funny because the blackout, of course, has happened several times in New York. It happened first in '65,
Right.
when I was about 21 years old, and there was no problems then.
No.
It happened later in the '70s, great deal of problems.
Yeah.
And it happens later still, no problems.
Right, no problems, but that was because it was after 9/11, I think, too.
Yeah, exactly. Also, this is a very post 9/11 film, and there's a funny little line in there where somebody says, if you take a picture of yourself at 9/11, do you smile?
Or at Ground Zero.
Yeah, exactly. Ground Zero. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I want to get to the wonderful artificial set you have of the city. This created, this artificial city you create, which I think is tied into 9/11, I suppose.
It's actually computer generated.
Yeah.
It looks like a model, but yeah.
Well, how does that create it? It's amazing.
Yeah, it's 3D. It's Maya and the various programs they use. But I wanted it to be a model, but we couldn't really afford that. And this guy worked on Hedvig, and he said, "Can you make it look like a model?" So he did a lot of painting surfaces. He would scan it and then put it on a 3D model of a building or, Ground Zero or the Statue of Liberty. So it was very handmade, kind of 3D animation. And that was necessary. We couldn't afford to have a blackout, so why not create this fairy tale blackout?
Exactly.
We can't afford to have a helicopter shot of the Statue of Liberty. Let's make our own.
Now you have two principal voyeurs in the film, one male and one female. The female is obvious; she's there snapping Polaroids at people. The male is less obvious; he's surreptitious, which I guess is human psychology, the way men and women do those things. Is it meant to be?
Yeah, I mean that's the other. That's part and parcel of this whole YouTube, MySpace kind of voyeuristic society that we're all in. And even James, who's videotaping himself, is almost this weird self-voyeur. A character in the film is pointing to the non-orgasmic woman and say, "Why don't you come into the orgy room? You can just look around. Voyeurism is participation." And a lot of people forget that voyeurism can be active in a good way instead of just passive and letting it pass you by. The voyeur in the film, the most obvious voyeur, the stalker, has been watching someone for a very long time. And to me, he is the audience. He knows everything about the characters. They don't know him. He cares about them and wants them to be okay. And at a certain point, there's an intervention.
Right.
The stalker actually acts. And it's only in that moment that he becomes a real person. So I hope our audience is the same instead of just a passive actor. That, the film will just, instigate a little bit of creativity in them and maybe make something or do something. And I feel that everything I do, and the only art I really like is, it does instigate some kind of action and is inspiring or useful in some way.
Talk about the overture of sex. The most explicit sex that takes place in the film is in the opening section, and needless to say, a kind of overture, not unlike Woody Allen's overture in Manhattan, where the city has a kind of fireworks orgasm over Yankee Stadium and everything. It's not unlike that in some respects. The films actually are complementary in some ways. But talk about your overture.
Well, we do call it the overture, actually. We find all the characters engaged in some sexual activity simultaneously, and we have this 3D model of the city, and we zoom into windows and find out what's going on simultaneously. And many of these characters don't know each other, but eventually converge later, and they all orgasm at the same time. And then we have this post-coital sadness for all the characters. Someone actually says, her favorite orgasm is when she feels like time has stopped and she's alone. She's finally alone. And the guy, after coming, says, onto a Jackson Pollock painting, says, "Were you sad afterwards?" And she said, "Well, yeah, because time hadn't stopped and I wasn't alone." And there's that weird thing of we all don't want to be alone, but after that moment, we're even there with our lover, it's that's why sex and death have this weird connection. It's the beauty and the horror. The beauty of actually being alone and being at peace, but also the horror of being alone and being truly cut off and truly, solipsistic, So the characters, I think, find it impossible to be alone. And though that does seem horrifying, on paper, being alone it seems easier, especially if you've been through it in a relationship.
Yes.
But why is it impossible? All the characters, it is impossible for them to be alone, and that's what saves them in the end. Otherwise, the natural conclusion of being alone is just death. And, one of the original titles of the film was Little Deaths, which refers to the French term for an orgasm, the little
Petite
death.
mort.
Yeah, which seems a little. Shortbus just seemed to, get more asses in the seat. I don't.
Yes.
It's like people are going to come to be titillated.
Yeah.
They're going to go out with something much more. People can't conceive of sex on film that isn't pornographic, which is a little weird to think about, when porn is really, the purpose of it is to be aroused and to arouse.
But at the same time, more and more sex has creeped into films. And the division between what is real sex in film and what isn't is so, like at Tu Mama. You get so close to, sometimes or the British Queer as Folk. What's the difference between the guy who's licking Nathan's supposed 15-year-old butt and somebody actually having sex with an underage kid? At some point, there's almost no difference between what they're simulating and what somebody's actually doing. It's gotten that close.
Well, I don't know. There's some. I would argue that Queer as Folk is using it to titillate, which is fine. I have no problem with porn. I think good porn is great. I think most porn sucks because nobody's having a good time.
Yeah, exactly.
They're all doing it in the same order and the same. It's just as bad as Hollywood.
Well, it's a very conservative medium. Actually, it's dominated by conservative impulses.
It's just like it's like there's no Satanists without Christian. Satanists have to believe in God to be Satanists.
Right. Yeah.
Pornographers, unfortunately, don't always inject the richness of their own sexual life into their porn. It becomes another commodity, and same body, same music, same bullshit. There was, certainly people who made good porn in the 70s and 80s. Now it feels really joyless, and I don't really like it anymore. But I would actually like to make a porn film sometime, using what I learned from Shortbus, which is pretty de-eroticized in my view, but learning what I know about how to relax everybody, and having couples and cameras far away and spontaneity and not trying to, all right, put your leg behind your head. It's like, how can you have how can anyone have a good time?
You can't direct it. I found that I directed. There's some sex in a short film I made. You can't direct it.
No, you have to create an environment.
Yeah, and let people be comfortable with what they're willing to give you, what they're capable of giving.
Exactly.
How come you're not in the film yourself?
Oh, I didn't like directing myself.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
I have a couple cameos. One of which is just the back of my head, because one of the actors said, well, we had to go there, you got to go there. So I tried something I hadn't done before, so I ate pussy in one shot.
Baby.
Which wasn't bad.
That's scandalous. You could be defrocked from some parts of the homosexual
My mother's
church.
going to be delighted. Finally, and I can prove it.
What did there's a lot of improv in the film. What did the actors bring to it? Give me any specific examples of something an actor brought into the film that might not have been there otherwise? And was that more erotic or just emotional beats?
All of it came from the actors. I honed it. I borrowed things from here and there, but everything, all of their character, and in fact, all of their dialogue came from them. I had a set script that came from the improv, but I encouraged them to paraphrase when we were shooting, to always make it different. So pretty much every line came out of an improv or was suggested by an improv, and I adapted it. So they're inseparable from their we're co-writers.
So was there any major thing that fell out because it seemed like a good idea at the time, but just for some reason doesn't work in the real film?
Yeah, the stuff that we shot, and it'll all be in DVD, but the stalker character actually was the Bush twins' personal assistant. So he's actually always on the phone with them or with Bush while he's stalking this guy, and you don't sing the national anthem scene. And so Bush just kind of keeps annoying him and calling him, and because he has no one to really talk to and who's impartial, you know, and he's kind of whiny and lonely. And finally he quits.
Yeah. And then all fell out.
Yeah, I mean, it set up the characters too important. You needed to know more, so I just made it more mysterious.
Yeah, I think that did work better.
Right.
But
they'll be on the DVD.
yeah, there's also questions about. One question I had was the injection of an older person, older guy. Is it Shortbus?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always, I'm 62 now myself, so I'm very sensitive about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think of myself, and probably never will, as a senior citizen.
Right.
But the question is, when somebody is injected into a scene like that, is there real desire there on the part of him and the younger person? What's really going on in there? Is there an erotic motif in that? And if there isn't, is it condescending in any way? I mean, I'm just trying to...
It's very erotic. But it's like, first of all, I dealt with who auditioned.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I had an interesting older couple, great.
Yeah.
I didn't have enough lesbian women, for example, audition, because I
Mm-hmm.
was thinking of a lesbian couple.
Right.
But maybe it's because I'm a man or whatever, but there were fewer women interested in auditioning for this. Wide open call, you know, whoever
Right, yeah.
wanted to could come in. But I did have this idea of this mayor.
Oh,
You know,
right.
and imagine there was a closeted mayor dealing with the outbreak of AIDS. What might he have done wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And imagine he knew that he had done wrong and sought some forgiveness within a somewhat erotic scene. You know, it's clearly, you know, he's coming on to this kid, and
Yeah.
the kid is charmed, but in a weird way is, you know, at the end, the man talks about his impermeability. You know, the mayor talks about his impermeability and how it's kind of destroyed him.
Yeah.
And it maybe even destroyed his possibility of a relationship. It maybe even destroyed people's lives. It may have even destroyed, in a very base way, a connection with this young man
Right. Mm-hmm.
who does forgive him,
Mhm.
but moves on.
Right.
You know,
Right.
the guy never quite takes responsibility, right? He says, we didn't know much then. You know, he's a tragic figure because you can see that he's very sweet, and we don't name him in the real world, but you know,
Well, I know.
right, for obvious reasons, we don't name him. But it'd be interesting to see if someone was in that situation and saw the film. You know, so that more than just being what do you call it? A role model for, you know, older gay men still being in erotic and romantic situation. He's more of a metaphor for a way of thinking. You know, there's nothing to do with his age. It just has to do with he was unbendable, and whatever requirement for power that he needed, he denied his heart. And he wasn't honest, and it destroyed him.
Question about style, because I love Hedwig, and Hedwig is in some ways a classic comedy. In some respects, there's a situation in Shortbus in the middle of the film that has kind of a screwball element or a farcical element, which is the vibrating egg that is controlled by the boyfriend husband. And I thought that was really good. You know, I think you did it. You could have taken it further. I mean, there's always the notion if a film is perceived to be a comedy, how comedic does it stay? Does it, like Sideways, have the guts to stay funny all the way to the end, like Little Miss Sunshine and stuff? You know, not get serious at the end. And the question is, how much? What did you think about the comic element and how much to take that? Because I think it works really well. It has an absurdist screwball kind of farcical comedy to it.
Well, my favorite films have comic elements, but I wouldn't call it just comedies. You know, Nashville, you know, they would market it as a comedy, but, you know, there's a lot more going on there. Or even, you know, Cassavetes' Minnie in Moscow, which was really a model for this. He called it his romantic comedy, but, you know, there's moments of tragedy in there too, and her husband beats the shit out of her, and, you know, so just like Hedwig, humor is used, the style of, the mechanisms of drag and, musicals are all there, but there's not much humor, in the last third, and of Hedwig, and it does, end with that. It's not it's a hopeful ending, but it's, I wouldn't call it a comedy.
Yeah.
In fact, when it's in a video store, it's always in a different spot when I bother to check it out, cult, gay, musical,
Right, yeah.
comedy.
The unclassifiable movie.
Yeah, which I like, and then it'll be the same with Shortbus. There won't be any natural place for it. And there's a point in Shortbus that turns, and we start to look inward, and it's pretty intense.
This question about, in real life, we're attracted to certain kinds of people, they are our types or they're not. To what degree did that happen in the casting of the film? I mean, to some degree, that invariably in a film like this, that people would be matched up with each other who would be in some way compatible with each other.
Well, I just took people's word for it, whether they could be attracted to someone.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was going to happen. You never know what's going to happen in life.
Yeah.
The guys that play James and Jamie are a couple. They were a couple before, and they still are a couple.
Well, that's good.
And they're old friends, and yeah, but they could have broken up. I mean, it's hard to know what was going to happen.
The film could destroy it.
Yeah, I mean, two of the actors who were husband and wife were not particularly attracted to each other. We worked it out. We figured it. Helped. We were close friends because we've been working together for 2.5 years, so we got through it. But other couples were in the film. All the people in the sex room were partners in some way, and the beautiful couple that Sophia sees, and when there's the male three-way, and we're all buddies, and in a way that kind of diffused a certain sexual energy for them. But he's a hard-on comes and goes. You got Viagra, you don't have Viagra. It was all friends, so we figured it out. Not every shot had to have pure arousal.
Yeah.
When we say real sex, obviously, just like in life, there's elements of performance and elements of arousal. It's like, is an actor really crying when he's crying on screen? No, it's both. He's feeling it, he's crying, he knows he's in a movie. It's the same with sex.
What about the national anthem? Where does that come from, actually?
Francis Scott Key actually wrote it about 200 years ago.
In terms of your film, where does it come from?
Oh. Well, it's a patriotic film, It opens with the Statue of Liberty and this idea of the outcasts coming to this country. I mean, that used to be the American value and hasn't been mentioned in a few years, has it?
It could be the most scandalizing segment in the film, actually, if it was taken out of context. for some people, I suppose.
Oh, it will be taken out of context.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone loves to take things out of context so they can be outraged. And I don't think we'll particularly be on a conservative right-wing radar with this film because it's not really worth it. They would know that it would just give it more publicity.
Right.
But yeah, there'll be a couple people who will be outraged by that, and fuck them.
Mm-hmm. Now, you come from a Catholic background, actually. I didn't know that the last time. So you must be very fascinated with the latest thing with the Pope and the new Pope and all this.
Yeah, I'm still interested in the church in a kind of a sports way, I guess.
Yeah.
I really
like you used to be a fan, sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. You only watch the sports that you played,
right?
As a kid. So.
Were you an altar boy?
I was, yeah. I was very religious, actually. And then various things happened. Puberty.
Yeah.
But it's like. There were good things that I learned from Catholicism, and the church structure itself is, stupid. So, but my aunt's a nun, and she's really cool, and she should be Pope, and it's a.
Final question: your reaction to the whole what's called the pedophile scandal, which I think has mislabeled it. It's actually a church scandal involving imposing both sex and a certain kind of false spirituality on young adolescents and pre-adolescents. What was your reaction to it, considering you come from...
Oh, it just makes sense. I mean, everybody knew a priest that was overly friendly, and in my case, when I was a kid in boarding school in Scotland, there was a priest who who took care of me, and he was, later I realized he was gay, and he had seen that he had sensed that I was going to be gay, so he kind of looked out for me, actually. He didn't interfere with me, but he would help me because I was kind of a freakish kid, and I was grateful for that. But, you know, in that environment, it's just dangerous because you got people saying you got to be celibate, and I think it does attract people who are emotionally immature, and maybe very much in love with some 12-year-old, but there's still a power difference. It's still fucked up, you know, and the church only aided and abetted that.
But for me, from my point of view, the thing I think about and what I learned about it, because I'm not Catholic, is that the church is recruiting people too early for the priesthood.
Yeah.
And they're deliberately depriving them of the sexual experience they should have. And if you do that, you're setting yourself up for that.
Well, I think they're just desperate for recruits. You know, it's just like the army. I mean,
But isn't that a kind of molestation to take a teenager and deprive him of the sexual experiences he should be going through and have him take a vow of celibacy he can't possibly believe?
You have no argument for me.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is wrong.
Very wrong.
People shouldn't be asked to do that until they're 30 or 40.
It's also wrong that women aren't allowed to be priests, and it's also wrong that gays aren't allowed to be in the military. Though that was my nightmare when I was a kid, was getting drafted because my dad was in the army.
Well, one more thing I'm going to ask you. There's now a movement among gay men. There's some gay men in Wisconsin who are actively trying to get into the military, you know, and they're interesting. They're sweet-looking kids, and they really want to join up precisely around Iraq. And we have to wonder, our gray beards like us have to wonder, you understand the impulse at the same time you don't. You know, I want to talk to them, find out what that is.
Well, being gay is not an insurance of good taste, you know, but people should be able to do what they want. I don't want to get married. I totally support gay marriage. You know, the more it's accepted, the more you're going to find more gay people that you don't like.
Yes.
Right? Which is the weird, you know, because it now becomes boring, free of conflict, and you get just as many gay Republicans. The more accepted it becomes, you'll have just as many gay Republicans as gay Democrats, and there'll be fewer gay people that you want to hang out with, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I understand.